As you reach the end of the Inca Trail, through the alpine tundra and the cloud forests, you can start to make out something through the fog. Surrounded by steep cliffs and moist-covered peaks, lies one of the most iconic archaeological sites on Earth. This is Machu Picchu, a city tucked away in the Andean mountains, remote enough to escape destruction by the Spanish conquistadors. Machu Picchu is in many ways surrounded by mystery, with its original purpose still being debated. Was it a royal estate, a ceremonial center, a pilgrimage site? Whatever its exact role, one thing is undeniable. Machu Picchu is one of the most spectacular examples of architecture embracing the geography around it. Rather than flattening the landscape or forcing nature to obey them, the Inca designed the city around the mountains themselves. Terraces follow the slopes of the hill, stairways are carved directly into the rock, and buildings seem to emerge naturally from the mountaintop. Machu Picchu raises a lot of questions, and we will try to explore some of them through the lens of Civilization VI. So let's see how the game chooses to portray this breathtaking wonder. In Civilization VI, Machu Picchu provides the following bonuses: +4 gold, and mountain tiles provide a standard adjacency bonus to commercial hub, theatre square, and industrial zone districts in all cities. Okay, so we have to address the elephant in the room really fast before we begin. Machu Picchu in Civilization VI is a classical era wonder. This is completely historical, like way off. We know that Machu Picchu was built around the 15th century, which would place it comfortably around the Renaissance era. So why did the game make this decision? There are some explanations. One is of course for reasons of game balance. It's obvious that the developers wanted the wonders to be spread out in the tech and civics trees, so some sacrifices had to be made. Another reason would be that, as we will see, Machu Picchu pairs really well with the engineering tech that belongs in the classical era. The last reason I can think of is a bit more concerning, let's say. It's no secret that the Civilization games have been very Eurocentric in various aspects, no matter how much they try to do the opposite. The most obvious way to see that is in the tech and civics trees that follow the progression of European and later American history almost one-to-one. It's needless to say that not all parts of the world followed this exact progression. Another way that this Eurocentric bias is shown is by making a lot of the indigenous civs of the Americas and Africa to be more powerful in the ancient eras, rather than the eras that are more appropriate for them. The Aztecs are the perfect example of this. So having Machu Picchu be represented in the classical era, while being a wonder very much connected to the Inca Empire, could be seen as a symptom of that habit. I am not saying that the games don't have reasons for these depictions. It's a big topic and it's well outside the scope of this video. But if we are to examine the history behind the game's features, then we obviously have to address that placing Machu Picchu in the classical era is tragically wrong. Okay, so with that out of the way, we can finally talk about Machu Picchu, starting with a quick background of the people that constructed it, the Inca. Andean civilizations developed very uniquely, mostly because they had little to zero contact with any other group before the arrival of the conquistadors. They did not have a written language, but were using the quipu, an interesting system of colored strings that they would tie in certain knots to convey certain information. They also never used money for exchanges, instead having their own system of redistribution, favors, and other material exchanges. The different Andean groups were eventually united under Pachacuti and his successors, who formed the Inca Empire in the early 15th century. The empire expanded very fast through means of war and diplomacy, and it eventually reached from modern-day Ecuador down to central Chile and Argentina. It was the largest empire in America before the arrival of the Europeans. However, it was very short, lasting merely around 100 years. Shortly after their first contact with the Portuguese explorer Aleixo Garcia, the Incan Empire faced a civil war, while also being ravaged by a deadly illness, possibly spread from Mexico. In this weakened state, the Inca were eventually conquered by Spanish conquistadors, led by Francisco Pizarro, who pillaged and looted the majority of their impressive empire. One side, however, was left unbothered, perhaps because of its very secure location, or maybe because it was already abandoned. Let's take a look at what we know about Machu Picchu. This very unique city started construction under Pachacuti sometimes after 1440 AD, and its construction lasted almost until the fall of the Inca Empire, around 80 to 90 years later. To finally start discussing Machu Picchu's in-game bonuses, we can start with the more obvious one. Mountains in Civ VI have a very limited role, being useful to campuses and holy sites, and acting as natural barriers otherwise. Well, with the presence of Machu Picchu, mountains become very useful and an integral part of your Civ's empire, giving you bonuses to pretty much all of your different zones. We can look towards the significance that mountains had to Incan culture to find some explanations for this effect. The Incas and the Andean people of the time in general worshipped many deities which were heavily connected to nature and believed to be influencing every aspect of life. The landscape and its features were also worshipped, and the Incas had a particular reverence towards mountains, constructing over 100 ceremonial sites at the summits of many of them, which is a mind-boggling feat if you think about it. It's very obvious that mountains were not an obstacle to the Inca. Machu Picchu itself is the most visible expression of the relationship to them, a city built not despite the mountains, but because of them, integrated into the landscape so thoroughly that it is difficult to tell where the natural rock ends and the construction begins. I like to think of the adjacency bonus that the mountains provide as a representation of how the Inca civilization developed side by side with the Andes mountain range. Now for the gold bonus, I'm a bit conflicted. As I mentioned earlier, the Inca did not use money, instead having their own economic system. But then I remember the bonus that Civ V attributes to Machu Picchu, and how it provides gold while also giving a nice bonus to road connections. One of the greatest achievements of the Incas, apart from their incredible engineering, was just how many roads they managed to build across their vast empire. They constructed a network of more than 30,000 kilometers, something that rivaled even the roads of the Roman Empire. What makes this accomplishment even crazier is the large segments of this road network that was made in incredibly unfavored terrain like steep hills and thick jungle, and much of it still exists to this day. I think that the gold bonus, just how it did in Civ V, could represent this advanced and extended network that brought together so many different parts of the large Incan Empire, undeniably aiding the trade of goods. Another possible explanation for it is that it makes reference to the natural wealth that the Inca Empire possessed. The realm of the Four Parts, another name for the empire, was extraordinarily wealthy, particularly in gold and silver, which held deep religious significance. Gold was considered the sweat of the sun god Inti, and silver the tears of the moon. The mountains of the Andes were also rich in mineral resources, and the Inca extracted and worked them extensively. So the gold bonus can be read as a representation of that mineral wealth of the mountain landscape and the broader prosperity of the Inca Empire at its height. The wonder requires the engineering technology. I have mentioned this quite a few times already, but the Inca really were extraordinary engineers. To be clear, Machu Picchu was constructed on top of a steep hill, 2,400 meters above sea level, surrounded by rivers. And it still stands perfectly fine. The amount of expertise that is required to accomplish such a feat is difficult to put into words. Machu Picchu's location also receives vast amount of rainfall every year, so the Inca engineers had to protect the construction from landslides and have a way to manage all the pouring water. For these reasons, construction of Machu Picchu actually started from the bottom up, where a bulwark of terraces were built that could take care of the rainwater in an elegant way, while also supporting and giving structure to the mountain. These terraces are a vital element of Machu Picchu, even if less shiny than the city on top. The city itself was also constructed very carefully and with regard to the environment and climate of the area. A complicated drainage system was built all along the city, which would provide the residents with fresh water while also taking care of the rainwater. And finally, the actual stones with which the city was built were quarried on the same hill and were cut with such precision that you could hardly pass a knife through them. And the Inca were able to transform granite, a very hard material, without the use of iron tools, which is also pretty crazy. Machu Picchu is really a masterpiece of engineering, highlighting all the different qualities that made the Inca exceptional. The wonder must be built on a mountain tile that does not contain a volcano. Very accurate restrictions as usual, although Machu Picchu would look even cooler if it was built on top of a volcano, I must say. However, building a permanent settlement on an active volcano is, historically speaking, not a great idea. We already talked about how the Inca venerated the mountains as deities and the general significance they had in Incan culture. Another thing that is worth noting here is that Machu Picchu was built on top of two fault lines, which caused frequent earthquakes. Just another feature that proves how impressive it is for the city to still survive today.
Eagles fly the turrets round and seem to flaunt the sky. They eye those walls now crumbling in decay, and scarce from quiet rest their destined prey.
The in-game quote comes from Samuel Prout Hill, a 19th century writer, and describes a scene of crumbling fortifications on a hilltop watched over by circling eagles. The image he creates is very strong, but it is worth noting that the quote was not written about Machu Picchu, since the site was not widely known to the Western world until 1911, and Prout Hill was writing well before that. However, it does fit the visual atmosphere of Machu Picchu quite nicely. On the note of Machu Picchu's alleged discovery, it is worth mentioning the story of Hiram Bingham III here. Bingham was an American academic, explorer, and politician who in 1911 organized the Yale Peruvian expedition, hoping to find Vilcabamba, the last capital of the Inca Empire. On July 24th of the same year, a local farmer named Melchor Arteaga led Bingham to the abandoned city, which had never been forgotten by the indigenous communities of the surrounding area. Bingham misidentified Machu Picchu as Vilcabamba, and what followed was a significant removal of artifacts from the site, which Bingham took to Yale University, sparking a decades-long dispute between Yale and the Peruvian government that was only resolved around 2012. Bingham's work with National Geographic and his book Lost City of the Incas undeniably brought Machu Picchu to international attention, making it popular enough that it became the largest tourist site in the Andes. However, crediting him as the city's discoverer is misleading. It ignores the fact that he was led by the indigenous people of the area, while we also have evidence of other Europeans and locals leaving their mark on the site some years before Bingham's expedition. Machu Picchu was abandoned sometime in the late 16th century, most likely as a direct consequence of the Spanish conquest of the Inca Empire. The leading theory is that the site was evacuated rather than destroyed, with its inhabitants either fleeing or being absorbed into the collapsing imperial structure. The Spanish, for their part, never found it. Unlike Cusco and other major Inca centers, Machu Picchu was never looted or demolished by the conquistadors, which is a significant part of why it survived in the condition it did. The centuries that followed saw the jungle slowly reclaim the site, with vegetation covering its terraces and buildings until Bingham's expedition cleared enough of it to reveal the scale of what was underneath. In a strange way, Machu Picchu's remarkably remote location and its abandonment may well have saved it so that we can appreciate it properly today. Apart from my issue with the placement of Machu Picchu in the classical era, and the gold bonus being a bit iffy, I have no major issues with its depiction in Civ VI. The adjacency bonus mechanic is unique among the wonders covered in the series so far, changing how you interact with the natural environment in a civilization level, which fits perfectly with the Incan culture and history. It's a very neat way to indicate that the Incas didn't see mountains as obstacles, but as useful monuments of nature that are to be cared and respected. So all in all, with some historical video game nonsense pushed aside, it's a perfectly fine overall translation.